All right, welcome everybody. I hope your week is going well. I apologize for not getting this video out sooner this morning. Life happens, so I appreciate your patience. So I wanted to spend some time talking about compare and contrast. You read about it last week in the textbook. We're practicing some comparing and contrasting this week in the discussion board, and we do have an essay that goes along with this particular type of essay structure coming up soon. So I thought it would be important to kind of go over different elements of compare and contrast and how to utilize that in an essay format. So I do have some citation down here at the bottom. This has been a presentation that is inspired by the UMHS online writing lab. So let's go ahead and get started. So what is the purpose? Why would you write a compare and contrast essay, and how would you do it? So basically, you're going to look at how to show similarities, which is the comparing between two things, two ideas, two books, whatever it may be, and show the differences. So that's a basic understanding of what compare and contrast is. But it also can go into a deeper level. As our textbook says, it shows if one thing is better than another. So if you're trying to decide between two things, which one's better, we do this every day in our lives. Maybe you did that this morning when you chose what you were going to wear, which one's going to be better for the day. Here in Colorado, it was rainy this morning, so my choices had to be dictated by that. So you compare and contrast even when you are doing daily tasks. So to show if one thing is better than the other. So another way to use compare and contrast is to show that the thing that seem different are actually alike. So that could be, political points of view. It could be the type of food that different cultures eat. Whatever it may be, when you compare them, maybe you could find similarities that otherwise would not be apparent, which is actually the assignment that I'm asking you to do. So it kind of fits in that category. And then, of course, things that seem the same but are actually different. So this is when you compare things that are very similar and then show the differences. So when you get ready to write a compare and contrast essay, you can use different graphic organizers, and it's very effective, especially when you start to decide how to format your paper. So what I have up here is if I were comparing two different types of cars, so a BMW and a Honda Civic, and then I have categories, ways in which I could compare and contrast them. So I have price, mileage, insurance, and you could think on your own what would go in here. So BMW would cost so much money, Honda Civic is going to cost so much money. You could research these things. Perhaps you could also put under price, like how much maintenance is it going to need to add throughout the life of the car? So will maintenance cost more? Do parts cost more? You can go into a lot of detail in each category. And this is a way to brainstorm. It's a way to organize your thoughts. But we can actually put this into, the BMW and put all the stuff about price and BMW here. And then the Honda Civic, all the stuff about that there. Same with mileage, insurance, cost, that kind of stuff. So you're comparing each of these cars through specific viewpoints. So I do suggest when you're starting to develop your compare and contrast essay, whatever you're deciding to compare, whether it's, what was life like as a kid versus as a teenager, or what was life like in the 1950s as opposed to today, or, you might be comparing, different political points of view, whatever it is. I suggest that you break it down into specific areas of focus. For one, it will help you keep the paper to that 3 to 4 page element, which we're trying to keep to, so you're not having a 10-page compare and contrast paper. And it also will help you organize as you write the paper. So it helps you create a thesis statement, it helps you organize your paper, it helps you stay on track. So I do suggest that you try to break it down, maybe 3, maybe 4 elements that you're going to compare and contrast between each item or idea that you've decided to focus on. And then it can help you decide how to format the paper. Let's look at some different things. Another way, so that was one graphic organizer you can use. This is a very popular, well-known graphic organizer for compare and contrast, and that's the Venn diagram. You know, you have the two circles, and over here might be the BMW, and over here might be the Honda Civic, and this is all the things that are different, all the things that are different, and then all the things that are alike, or that overlap section. So that's another way to organize. I actually prefer the chart because it's more specific and it can help you a little bit better with organizing your paper than a Venn diagram can. This might be something that you use early on in your thought process in terms of maybe trying to find those areas of focus. So it's definitely a helpful tool. It's not the only tool, and I would have to say that in terms of getting ready to write the paper, I prefer other methods. You might have a method that you like to use. These are just some suggestions. So once you've decided your focus, what your topic is, and then determine those areas of focus like mileage, cost, so on and so forth, you can actually start to write a thesis statement. So a compare and contrast thesis statement can be very tricky, and the reason why is oftentimes we revert back to, you know, the papers that we wrote in 6th grade, because this is actually a very common type of paper that you would write as a young person, because it's pretty much easy structure to follow, and kids, because you do this in everyday life, it fits well with a kid being able to write their first essay kind of thing. So when you write a thesis statement for these types of essays, it can become like, you know, a BMW and a Honda Civic are very similar, but they also have differences. Well, that's not a very specific thesis statement, and it's not very effective. And as a college writer, you need to go a little bit further, a little deeper. So when you're preparing to write your thesis statement, first of all, you want to review your data. Review any research that you've already done. Review the main points that you want to make. Review those charts and graphs that you've already done to try to help you generate ideas. And to decide to what extent you will stress similarities between your subjects and to what extent you're going to stress their differences. Is it going to be an equal showing of similarities and differences, or are you trying to make a point one way or another? So should there be a lean toward similarities or a lean toward differences? So remember, the assignment for our paper is to show similarities where we wouldn't normally see them. So that might help you determine where your stress is going to be, if there's going to be a stress on one side or the other. And then decide your specific approach that you're going to take. Of course, we already kind of have a guided element with this paper, because I am asking you to show similarities where there would otherwise not be seen. So it's a little bit more guided in that regard, but you can take a specific approach that fits with your particular topic. So you're going to decide on approach, decide on your stresses, and then create a thesis statement that reflects on that decision. So what you're going to stress, what is your approach, and your thesis statement should basically follow that. So here are some weak thesis statements. I've already kind of mentioned one, but they are both somewhat alike and somewhat different. Well, here we have that, you know, revert back to 6th grade writing with the somewhat alike and somewhat different phrasing. And then we also have a non-specific thesis statement. We say they. Well, what is they? We have no idea, because it's not clear in the thesis statement. We really need to outline the topic in your thesis statement, just like we pointed out in a previous PowerPoint presentation. So the topic needs to be clear in a thesis statement in this type of paper, just like it would be with any other type of paper. So clear thesis statement needs to have a topic, it needs to have a point of view, and it needs to have details. How are you going to prove it? And the compare and contrast thesis statement is the same way. Other weak thesis statements, I can see some similarities and some differences too. Here we have first person perspective, which we're going to try to stay away from as we move into these types of more academic papers. Of course, we've written sensory essays, we've written narratives. Both of those have first person perspective, but now we're going to try to remove that as much as possible in the next few papers. Both of them involve and give one specific similarity and one specific difference. One second. Sorry. excuse me. Can't stop with the recording. But this is a little bit better because we have specific similarities and specific differences, but there's only one of each. And so really to build a 3 to 4 page paper on only one similarity and one difference isn't really enough. So it's not enough detail, although it's getting better. Of course, we see that it's still not giving us a specific topic. So any of these would not be appropriate. So let's look at some better ones. Okay, so we have, while both the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist agreed that government was needed to establish order, the Federalists promoted a centralized federal authority, and the Anti-Federalists supported a loose confederation which favors states' rights. So here we have a specific topic, which is Federalist and Anti-Federalist. We can tell that they are being compared and contrasted without actually using words like similarities and differences or compare and contrast. They're not found in that thesis statement, but yet we still have a clear understanding of what's going to go on in this paper. We know that there's going to be a comparison between these two government ideas and basically the detail behind it, which would be centralized federal government or a loose confederation with a state's focus. So we have two very clear differences that are connected between these two, and where they agree with one another is very clear, and we also have a clear topic, so this is much better than the previous slide. Another one, so Ralph and Jack have very different leadership styles and motivations which lead them to eventual chaos and anarchy on the island. So this one is a little bit tricky because it's actually referring to characters in a book. You would have to rely on the rest of the introductory paragraph to understand which book this might be. So unless you know things about Ralph and Jack, not really sure. So this one is better because it does have a clear establishment of we are comparing these two characters, Ralph and Jack. We're comparing specifically their leadership styles and motivations and what are the results of that. So we have a little bit of a cause and effect as well within the idea of compare and contrast. So you have some specific details that are great. I would suggest anytime you are comparing and contrasting characters in a book or even books themselves that you actually state the titles or state the authors of the works or both in your thesis statement. I think that's an important element to include. So that one is okay. It needs a little bit more work, but it does have stronger details. Another one, in order to make a decision between Honda Civic and the BMW, the following must be considered: price of the vehicle, average mileage, and price of insurance. So this goes back to that graphic organizer we saw at the beginning. We have a clear understanding of the topics, which are Honda Civic and BMW. They are being compared. So, and there's a purpose for it. The comparison purpose is to decide which vehicle to purchase. You can see that at the beginning of the thesis statement. So we have a clear purpose, we have clear topic, and we actually have some details in terms of how is this paper going to be organized. And it's we're going to talk about price, average mileage, and insurance. So that's very clear in the thesis statement. I think that it probably could be worded a little better toward the end in terms of let's not just list things, but include the list in the development of the statement. But it would work very well for a thesis statement, and I would have no problem with a student writing a thesis statement like this. Notice there's no mention of the words similarities and differences. There's no mention of the words compare and contrast. So you can tell that that's what kind of paper it's going to be without actually saying those words. So when you start to work on organization, this is where this particular graphic organizer is really helpful because you can determine the way in which you're going to organize. So notice where it actually has second paragraph, third paragraph. Of course, we know first paragraph is the introduction of the essay, and it's going to include that thesis statement. So these are the body paragraphs of your essay. And you can approach a compare and contrast in two different ways. One of them is block organization. So this is where we would talk about BMW. in the second paragraph. And we talk about the price, we talk about the mileage, and we talk about the insurance. And then this third paragraph, we talk about Honda Civic, and then each particular detail as we go. So it would go across the graphic organizer, blocking each topic on its own. So this can also go a little bit more detailed, but it's still the same blocking type of format. So if you had a longer paper, you can block in separate paragraphs, but it's still along the same line. So we have the BMW. So your second paragraph's about BMW price, third paragraph's about BMW mileage, fourth paragraph's about BMW insurance. And then you go to your second block, which is the other thing you are comparing, which is the Honda Civic. And then you have a fifth paragraph about price, sixth about mileage, seventh about insurance. I think it's important that these organization, if you choose to do block organization, I think it's important that they still say in the same order. So if you approach BMW first, you do price, mileage, insurance. And then you mirror that same organization for the other element that you're comparing, the Honda Civic, price, mileage, insurance, because you want your paper to be organized and clear. And this is one way to organize a paper, which would be block organization. And it's very effective and totally fine if you decide to do it that way. The other type of paragraph organization would be point by point. So this is when you're actually comparing the detail on its own. So you might have the second paragraph talking about price of BMW, price of Honda Civic. Then you go back to the third paragraph, price of BMW mileage, Honda Civic mileage. Fourth paragraph, BMW insurance, Honda Civic insurance. So you're going back and forth between topics and discussing each of the details about that topic separately. Also, a completely fine way to organize compare and contrast essays. It makes you go back and forth, which is completely fine. It's effective in many ways. So both of these organizations are completely okay to go with. You just need to choose one or the other. Otherwise, your paper can become disorganized and hard to follow. So just like the other expanded version, you can do the same thing with this format, so point by point. So instead of having just one paragraph talking about price, you might have two paragraphs, one for BMW, one for Honda Civic. Mileage, then you'll talk about mileage point by point. So fourth paragraph would be BMW mileage, fifth paragraph Honda Civic mileage, sixth paragraph BMW insurance, seventh paragraph Honda insurance. So it's pretty straightforward, and that's why I do recommend using these graphic organizers, because you can clearly decide your method of organization, and it can help you create outlines. It can help you build your paper organization. It can also help you build your thesis statement, because clearly the thesis statement is going to have Honda Civic and BMW in it, and clearly it's going to have price, mileage, and insurance on it. So each of those help you in many ways. I think it's a good graphic organizer to use. Obviously, I'm not going to be sitting there at your desk, so you can do whatever you want, but it's just something to help make the process easier. So here we see the block method in a outline format. So of course we have the introduction paragraph. That's each of these Roman numerals are a paragraph or a section of the paper. So the first one's going to be introduction. You get your attention grabber, sharing background information, and share your thesis statement. All introductions should have those elements. And then we have the block of each topic. So we're just going to talk about BMW, price, mileage, insurance. And then the block of the other elements. So that's Honda Civic, price, mileage, insurance. And then of course we have a conclusion, which would emphasize the major ties that you have created from these two topics of BMW and Honda. You're going to re-look at the ties that you have made, perhaps show the differences again, emphasize what you want to emphasize depending on your purpose. So the purpose of this essay was to determine which vehicle to buy. So you would want to bring that back up in the conclusion, determine so what's the purpose, which is to buy it or not, and then the evaluation, which would be your decision. So that should actually be at the conclusion if that's the purpose that you are going to have. So in our terms of our particular essay assignment, I'm asking you to share a compare and contrast that pretty much shares how two elements have communicated similarities that you wouldn't normally see. So that should come back in the conclusion and wrap everything up. Here is an outline based on point by point. So this is when we look at the different topics that we're going to expand upon for each of the compared elements. So we have the introduction, same thing. We have the conclusion, same thing, but the body paragraphs are different. So the second section is just on price. And we talk about BMW price, Honda price, just on mileage, BMW mileage, Honda mileage, just on insurance, BMW insurance, Honda insurance. So you can see that these are very straightforward methods of organization, and it works well with the graphic organizer that I presented earlier. And these are the two different ways that you might decide to structure a compare and contrast essay. So things to think about. Like I said earlier, we want to try to avoid that typical writing of a compare and contrast. Using words like similarities and differences are fine, but we want to use other things too, so it doesn't just feel like we're using those typical words. So to compare, you can use transition words like also, as, in the same way, like, likewise, similarly, comparably, equally, in addition. So all of these lend to the idea that you are showing that they are similar without saying they are similar because every time you have a sentence. And to contrast, you can use transition words like although, but, even though, however, on the other hand, otherwise, yet, still, conversely, as opposed to, different from, whereas. All of these are transition words that can help you to contrast elements in these papers. And no, you don't have to use every word on the list, and no, you really don't have to use these words. These are ideas to help you get going with the writing of your paper. So to review, make sure you understand the purpose of the assignment, what you're going to do to compare and contrast. Complete your pre-writing activities like those graphic organizers I showed. Make sure you gather evidence. This assignment is actually requiring at least one outside source to utilize in the paper, so you do need to gather evidence. Make sure you create a clear thesis statement. This is going to be very important when you create this essay because it is the roadmap for the rest of the paper. It lets everybody know, hey, this is what my paper is going to be about. And so we need to have a clear purpose through a thesis statement at the beginning. You're also going to choose an organizational pattern. Are you going to block organize? Or are you going to do point by point? Write an outline. This can be a very helpful element when you are creating your papers. No, I do not want to see an outline unless we talk about it in the discussion board, but I don't want to see it when you turn it in. It's purely to help you create the paper. So you don't have to do this, but it's very helpful, as we already saw. And then, of course, you're going to write your working draft. Next week, I'm going to be posting an optional discussion board area where you can post your compare and contrast essay for classmates to take a look at. Most of the time I also go in there and make some comments as well, so keep that in mind as we move toward next week. And then, of course, revise. We want to go through the writing process when we are going with this paper, so don't just write one draft and turn it in and be done. Actually work on it, write a draft, revise the draft, and then turn in the final paper. So things to keep in mind for this week. You're going to read page 41 to 55 and page 298 to 309 in the Longman Writer. You're going to work through Word Power Made Easy Session 4, which is on page 54 to 58 of our book. And we do have a quiz this week. I have already sent out the email with your vocabulary quiz password. If you did not get that, please email me and I can send it out to you. And if you're not getting emails from me, please contact Crowder and make sure that your email address coincides with what they have, because I only have what's accessed in the class. So whatever your email address is connected to the classroom, that's how I can get a hold of you. And keep in mind that the final draft of the compare and contrast essay is due by October 5th by 11:59 p.m. So that is all that I have for today. If you do have any questions, feel free to send me an email or give me a call. Otherwise, we will see you in our discussion board. Have a good night. Bye.